The grand chamber of the Galactic Confederacy hummed with the subtle vibrations of tension. Representatives of the oldest, most advanced species in the known galaxy had gathered for what was supposed to be a routine classification meeting. The crystalline forms of the Xylar delegation reflected prismatic light across the chamber, while the pure energy beings of the Cthar maintained their containment fields at a respectful distance from the bioengineered Forlag, whose living technology constantly shifted and adapted to the environment around them. Elder Xylos, the principal representative of the Xylar High Council, directed his attention to the holographic display hovering at the center of the assembly. The data stream showed the latest findings from the outer rim of the Orion Arm, where new species had recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Species designation: humans. Origin: planet Sol. 3. Locally known as Earth. Classification: Type 12 planet. Excessive water coverage, uncomfortable gravitational pull, unstable radiation levels. Elder Xylos' crystalline voice resonated through the chamber. Their biological structure is remarkably fragile, primarily carbon-based with significant water content and extremely limited regenerative capabilities. Conduit Cthar Prime, a being of pure energy who had witnessed the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations, pulsed with dismissive fluctuations. Their FTL technology is primitive at best. They've somehow managed to utilize the Alcubierre principles that most of us abandoned millennia ago due to inefficiency and spatial instability. Bioartisan Forlag 7, whose body was a masterpiece of organic engineering thousands of years in development, extended a sensory appendage toward the data stream. Their societal structure appears chaotic. Multiple competing governance systems, constant internal conflicts, fragmented historical data records. Typical of early-stage species. Nothing remarkable. The Confederacy's automated assessment algorithms had already processed the data and displayed their conclusion. Classification: third-tier species. Low potential, negligible risk. The classification should have been the end of the matter. Third-tier species were typically monitored passively, with minimal interference until they either stabilized in a second-tier status or, as was more common, destroyed themselves through resource depletion or internal conflict. The Confederacy had witnessed this pattern play out thousands of times over millions of years. But Archivist Telen, a member of the meticulous record-keeping Mnemosynes, had noticed something unusual in a peripheral data feed. As the other representatives were preparing to move on to more pressing matters, Talen's slender, pale appendages tapped at the console before them. Respected representatives, if I may draw your attention to an anomalous report. Talen's voice was soft, but carried a note of urgency unusual for their kind. An automated probe in the vicinity of human space ceased transmission approximately 32 cycles ago. The final data packet contains energy readings that do not match any known natural phenomenon in that sector. Elder Xylos shifted his crystalline form with a sound like chimes in the wind. Probe malfunctions are not uncommon, Archivist. Equipment failure occurs even with our technology. True, Elder, Telen acknowledged, but the pattern of energy distortion recorded immediately before transmission loss matches no known equipment failure in our database. Additionally, the trajectory calculation suggests the probe was redirected, not destroyed. Conduit Cthar Prime pulsed impatiently. What are you suggesting, Archivist? That these primitives somehow disabled one of our probes? Their technology is at least 7 developmental stages behind our current capabilities. I'm not suggesting anything, Conduit. I am merely pointing out an anomaly that warrants further investigation before final classification. Bioartisan Forlag 7's appendages rippled with amusement. The Mnemosynes and their anomalies. There's always some data point that doesn't fit perfectly into the pattern. The assembly seemed ready to dismiss Talen's concerns, but Elder Xylos, who had led his people through numerous first contact scenarios, raised a crystalline appendage. Let the record show that Archivist Telen has been granted permission to conduct a supplementary investigation into human capabilities. The official classification will remain as third tier, pending this investigation. As the assembly dispersed, Tallinn remained at the console, already beginning to compile historical data from the Confederate archives. Something about these humans troubled the archivist. There was a pattern here, hiding beneath the surface data, and Tallinn was determined to find it. In the private archives of the Mnemosyne repository, archivist Tallinn had spent countless cycles sifting through fragmentary records of early, unsuccessful contacts with humans and long-range observations of Earth. What had begun as a routine follow-up to an anomalous probe report had evolved into something else entirely, an obsession to understand what made humans different from the hundreds of other species Tallinn had studied throughout their career. The holographic displays surrounding Tallinn's workstation showed scenes from human history, conflicts that spanned their entire recorded existence. At first glance, they appear to be typical resource-driven struggles, the kind that all evolving species experienced. But as Tallinn delved deeper, patterns emerged that defied standard evolutionary models. Computer display the temporal comparison of human warfare techniques versus technological development stages, Tallinn instructed. The display reorganized to show a timeline comparing human technological capabilities with their methods of warfare. What should have been a relatively linear progression showed instead dramatic spikes and inexplicable leaps. They developed nuclear weapons before achieving reliable air travel, Tallinn murmured, appendages twitching in confusion. And then, they stopped using them after only 2 deployments? More perplexing still were the motivations behind these conflicts. The Confederacy understood wars for resources, territory, or even population control. These are logical, if primitive, responses to environmental pressures. But humans fought wars that lasted centuries over abstract concepts like ideology, religion, and even honor. Tallinn focused on one particularly puzzling conflict that humans called the Crusades. For nearly 200 years, humans had traveled thousands of kilometers, an extraordinary undertaking given their technological limitations at the time, to fight and die over which version of an unprovable deity should control a specific patch of relatively resource-poor land. The sheer logic of it was astounding. Even more disturbing were the reports of individual human behavior during conflicts. Tallinn reviewed footage of what humans termed suicide bombings, where individuals would destroy themselves specifically to harm others, or human wave attacks, where thousands would charge directly into certain death with minimal strategic advantage. No rational species would behave this way. Computer access records on human technological development patterns. The displays shifted again, showing the erratic progression of human innovation. Unlike other species, whose technological advancement typically followed predictable paths based on resource availability and environmental challenges, humans showed a disturbing tendency to make their greatest technological leaps during or immediately after their most destructive conflicts. Their approach to scientific discovery was equally perplexing. Where other species methodically explored the most efficient and stable paths of development, humans often pursued what the Confederacy had long ago classified as dead ends or inefficient principles, somehow wringing practical applications from theoretically suboptimal approaches. They're using quantum entanglement for communication, Tallinn noted with disbelief. Every other species abandoned that approach after discovering the luminal wave. Yet humans had developed a workable, if crude, system using principles that the Confederacy's best scientists had dismissed millennia ago. Tallinn's research led to a particularly disturbing case study, the Mars Red Crisis. Approximately 50 Earth years earlier, a human faction on Mars had faced extinction due to a self-inflicted environmental catastrophe. Rather than evacuate or request assistance from Earth, they had undertaken what Confederate analysis would classify as an insane gamble, an untested, extremely high-risk project to modify the local climate using methodologies that had a calculated 90% chance of catastrophic failure and potential planetary destruction. Most remarkably, they had succeeded. The data was clear. Faced with certain extinction, the humans had chosen to risk immediate, catastrophic destruction of their entire colony rather than accept defeat. And somehow, Against all probability, their reckless approach had worked. They shouldn't have survived, Talon whispered to the empty archive. By any rational assessment, they should have destroyed themselves. The implications were deeply troubling. If humans could not be relied upon to follow rational patterns of behavior, how could the Confederacy possibly predict their actions? Talon compiled their findings into a preliminary report, expecting it to be dismissed as the obsessive work of an over-analytical archivist. Instead, it generated immediate concern among the Confederate High Council. Within days, a multi-species expert team was assembled to investigate further, with Talon assigned as primary data coordinator. The team gathered in a secure facility on the Confederate capital world. In addition to Talon, it included a Xyler psychological theorist, a Cathar strategic analyst, a Forlag sociobiologist, and specialists from several other advanced species. Their task, to apply the Confederacy's most sophisticated psychological and sociological models to understand human behavior. The fundamental problem, began psychological theorist Xyler Vex, whose crystalline form was specialized for cognitive pattern analysis, is that every model we attempt to apply fails to predict human behavior with acceptable accuracy. When we adjust for resource competition, we cannot account for their altruistic tendencies. When we adjust for group cohesion, we cannot explain their intense individualism. Their concepts defy rational classification, added Cathar Analytical, whose energy form flickered with frustration. Take this notion they call hope. It appears to be a belief in positive outcomes despite contrary evidence. It should be maladaptive, yet it has driven them to achieve what should be impossible odds. The Forlag sociobiologist, whose name translated roughly as harmony within systems, undulated in agreement. Or consider regret, a backward-looking emotional response that changes nothing, yet consumes significant cognitive resources. Or loyalty, which can override self-preservation even when the loyalty object has objectively failed the individual. And what are we to make of art and music? Asked Talon. They devote enormous resources to creating experiences that have no survival value, yet can provoke profound physiological responses. Their humor is most perplexing, noted an observer from the methane-breathing Jovari species. Particularly what they call dark humor, finding amusement in their own suffering or mortality. It serves no discernible adaptive purpose. After months of analysis, the team identified what they termed dual drive mechanisms, seemingly contradictory motivational pairs that somehow coexisted within human psychology. Creation and destruction. Humans could use the same knowledge base to create breathtaking beauty or terrifying weapons. Cooperation and competition. They showed remarkable unity when facing external threats, but engaged in vicious competition during peaceful periods. Logic and emotion. They could develop sophisticated long-term strategic plans, but make instantaneous decisions based purely on emotional responses. Altruism and selfishness. They could sacrifice themselves for others or an ideal, yet also act with extreme self-interest. It is as though they exist in multiple states simultaneously, observed Xyler Vex. Their quantum uncertainty exists at the macroscopic level of behavior, not merely the subatomic. The team delved deeper, analyzing what they termed breaking points, situations where humans operated under extreme pressure or faced seemingly insurmountable adversity. The patterns they discovered were disturbing. They don't merely try to survive, explained Cathar Analytical. They attempt to overcome or defeat adversity, often taking actions that increase short-term risk for potential long-term advantage. They search for meaning in suffering, transforming negative experiences into sources of motivation or identity. Perhaps most perplexing was the human concept of existential ennui, a fear of meaninglessness that could drive them to seek dangerous challenges or even create conflict simply to feel alive. This explained patterns of behavior that had previously seemed completely irrational, such as recreational activities with high mortality rates or artistic endeavors that deliberately invoke distress. Our conclusion, Talon told the assembled team as they prepared their preliminary report. is that humans represent a unique danger not because they are stronger or more intelligent by standard metrics, but because their psychological drive system is too complex, nonlinear, and unpredictable. They are capable of acting in ways that logical species cannot anticipate or effectively counter. The implications were unsettling. A species that couldn't be reliably modeled was, by definition, a species that couldn't be reliably controlled or contained if they ever became a threat. As the investigation continued, the expert team shifted their focus from human behavior to human innovation. They had realized that the greatest danger wasn't predictable aggression, but unpredictable breakthroughs. Consider these case studies Talon presented to the team. First, what humans called the harmonic revolution in their music approximately 20 Earth years ago. A human composer discovered frequency combinations that, while merely pleasant to human neurology, created intense neurochemical responses in Melbari brain structure. It wasn't designed as a weapon, yet it caused significant social disruption in 3 Melbari systems before it could be contained. The display shifted to show technical schematics. Second, their pseudo-dark matter technology. In their search for new energy sources, humans accidentally created a method of extracting energy from localized spacetime that violates what we considered immutable conservation laws. The technology is wildly unstable and risks creating spatial tears, yet they continue to refine it because they find it interesting. Most concerning, Talon continued, is what we're calling mimetic philosophy transmission. A human philosophical system centered on free will and individualism has begun spreading through Confederate information networks, causing instability and questioning of collective or destiny-based social structures among several species. Again, not an attack, but nonetheless eroding cultural foundations. Psychological theorist Zyler Vex's crystalline structure resonated with concern. We've identified the root of the problem. Human creativity is driven not just by practical needs, as with most species, but by pure curiosity, desire to prove something, internal competition, or simply to see what happens. They willingly accept high risk and bypass standard safety protocols if they believe a breakthrough is possible. It's their combination of breakthrough, creativity, and lack of consequence awareness that makes them so dangerous, added Kthar Analytical. They focus on solving the immediate problem or achieving the creative goal with minimal consideration of long-term consequences for themselves or other species. The team had documented numerous examples of human innovations that had nearly led to their own extinction, from early nuclear weapons to genetic manipulation experiments to artificial intelligence development. Each time, humans had pulled back from the brink, not through careful planning, but through a combination of luck and last-minute adaptation. They're like a species that evolved without predators, observe harmony within systems. They have no innate caution because nothing in their evolutionary history taught them the consequences of overreaching. What made this particularly dangerous was humanity's accelerating rate of innovation. The expert team calculated that at current progression rates, humans would match or exceed Confederate technology in several critical domains within just a few hundred years, a mere moment in galactic terms. And what then? Asked Talon. A species that cannot be predicted, wielding technologies equal to our own, driven by motivations we cannot fully comprehend. The final report the expert team presented to the Confederate Council was the most alarming assessment of a new species in over 10,000 years. The chamber was filled to capacity, with representatives from all 327 member species in attendance, either physically or via quantum presence. Elder Xylos presided over the session, his crystalline form pulsing with the deep blues of concern. Archivist Talon, you may present your team's findings. Talon moved to the central podium, data crystals in hand. Respected Council, our team has concluded that the initial classification of humans as a third-tier species represents a critical error based on limited understanding of standard metrics. The holographic displays activated, showing footage of human achievements, conflicts, and innovations. Humans are not dangerous because of their current military capabilities. though the potential is certainly there. They are dangerous because of 5 key factors that set them apart from any species we have previously encountered. Talen highlighted each factor in turn. First, unpredictability. Their behavior is based on a complex, often illogical psychology that our models cannot reliably anticipate. Second, extreme adaptability. They can rapidly change strategies, technologies, even social structures when faced with challenges. What would require generations of gradual adaptation for most species, humans can accomplish within a single lifetime. Third, unpredictable creative drive. They can produce game-changing breakthroughs, often unintentionally, with far-reaching consequences. Fourth, rejection of limitations. They do not accept biological, physical, or social constraints that other species consider immutable. When told something is impossible, they often view it as a challenge rather than a fact. Finally, and perhaps most significantly, galactic change potential. They have the capability, both positive and negative, to fundamentally alter the rules, norms, and power balance of the entire Confederacy simply by their existence and actions. The council chamber erupted in overlapping communications. Some representatives demanded immediate quarantine or even preemptive elimination of humanity. Others, particularly those from younger species, argued for careful engagement and possible alliance. Convict Thar Prime's energy form pulsed with aggressive patterns. The risk is too great. History has shown that emerging aggressive species must be contained before they develop sufficiently to threaten galactic stability. And yet, countered Elder Xylos, who had been unusually quiet throughout the presentation, history has also shown that attempted containment of a sufficiently adaptable species often accelerates their development in precisely the directions we wish to avoid. Perceiving themselves under threat, they focus on defensive and offensive capabilities. The debate continued for days, with factions forming and reforming as new arguments were presented. Talen's team provided simulation after simulation, but each one showed the same outcome. Traditional approaches to managing emerging species would not work with humans. Finally, Elder Xylos, whose species had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations over millions of years, addressed the council. I have reviewed the data thoroughly, and I have come to a conclusion that may surprise many of you. Attempting to contain or eliminate humanity would likely be more dangerous than cautious understanding and cooperation. His crystalline form shifted to display patterns of deep wisdom. This species, these humans, represent something we have not seen before. Their unpredictability is matched only by their potential. Yes, they could become the greatest threat the Confederacy has ever faced, but they could also become our greatest allies, bringing perspectives and innovations that our more logical, stable species cannot generate. What are you suggesting? Demanded Thar Prime. That we simply allow them to develop unchecked. Not unchecked, replied Elder Xylos, but also not constrained by fear. I propose a new classification, potential paradigm shifter. We will monitor them closely, establish cautious diplomatic contact when appropriate, and most importantly, learn from them even as they learn from us. The council remained divided, with no clear consensus emerging. In the absence of agreement, the default protocol was observation without intervention, for now. As the representatives dispersed, Archivist Talen stood at a viewing portal, gazing in the direction of Earth, though it was far too distant to see. Elder Xylos approached, his crystalline form glimmering in the starlight. You seem troubled, Archivist, observed the ancient being. I am, admitted Talen. For the first time in my career, I fear for the future of the Confederacy. These humans, they change everything. Change was inevitable, said Elder Xylos. It always is. But not like this, countered Talen. Not so unpredictably. Not so fundamentally. The danger isn't just war or conflict, it's transformation. Humans will change us, change everything, simply by existing. Yes, agreed Elder Xylos. That is precisely what makes them so fascinating and so frightening. Talen's appendages twitched with nervous energy. What will you do now? Elder Xylos's crystalline form resonated with what, in a biological species, might have been laughter. I will do what I have always done, archivist. I will watch, I will learn, and I will adapt. As for you, your work has just begun. Me? Yes. You understood the humans when the rest of us saw only an insignificant species. You recognized the pattern when there appeared to be none. The Confederacy will need that insight in the cycles to come. As Elder Xylos departed, Talen remained at the viewing portal, contemplating the distant stars. Somewhere out there, on a water-covered world with uncomfortable gravity and unstable radiation, a species of contradictions was looking up at the same stars, perhaps wondering if they were alone. They weren't alone, and soon enough, they would know it. What would happen then was anyone's guess, and that, precisely, was what made humans the galaxy's most dangerous species. In the following years, Archivist Talen's research center expanded from a single workstation to an entire complex dedicated to human studies. Specialists from dozens of Confederate species contributed their expertise, all attempting to develop better models for predicting and understanding human behavior and innovation. Talen stood before a holographic display showing the latest data from Earth and its expanding sphere of colonies. They've established settlements on 17 worlds now, Talen informed the assembled team. Their rate of expansion has increased by 23% since our last assessment. Their FDL technology has improved as well, noted a Kthar analyst. They're now approaching efficiency levels that took the Forlag 3 times as long to achieve. The most disturbing developments, however, weren't technological but social. Humans had begun forming alliances with several non-Confederate species in the Orion Arm, creating what they called the Soul Compact, a loose federation of younger species united by principles that suspiciously resembled those mimetic philosophies the team had previously identified as potentially destabilizing. They're offering membership to any species that accepts their core principles, explained Talen. Individual rights, technological exchange, mutual defense. It's growing rapidly. A counter-confederacy, observed Zylervex. Not explicitly hostile to us, but definitely an alternative power structure. Elder Xylos, who had taken a personal interest in the Human Research Center, considered the information. And their internal conflicts? Significantly reduced, replied Talen. They appear to have united around the goal of expansion and alliance building. Their historical pattern of directing competitive impulses outward when faced with external challenges is holding true. And their creative output, Talen gestured, and the display showed a bewildering array of artistic, technological, and scientific developments, accelerating in all domains. They've made particularly significant breakthroughs in field manipulation theory, consciousness transfer technology, and something they're calling dimensional resonance, which our analysts still don't fully understand. Elder Xylos's crystalline structure shifted with concern. Have they detected our observation posts? We believe so, admitted Talen, though they've made no attempt to disable them. In fact, they appear to be deliberately conducting activities within range of our sensors. They're showing us what they can do, concluded Elder Xylos. But why? The answer came sooner than expected. 3 cycles later, as the Confederate Council was in session discussing trade disputes between the Melbari and Jovari systems, an unauthorized transmission interrupted the proceedings. The holographic projector at the center of the chamber activated, displaying the image of a human female in what appeared to be a formal uniform. Greetings to the Galactic Confederacy, she began, speaking perfect Confederate standard, a language that humans should have had no access to. I am Admiral Helena Chun, representing the United Earth Government and the Soul Compact. The council chamber erupted in confusion. Thar Primus' energy form flared dangerously. How was this possible? Our communication systems are secure. The human continued, seemingly oblivious to the chaos. We have been aware of your observation of Earth and human activities for some time now. We appreciate your restraint in not interfering with our development, though we have had many questions about your intentions. Elder Xylos moved forward, his crystalline form commanding immediate attention. I am Elder Xylos of the Confederate Council. Your direct communication is unexpected. The human smiled, a gesture that Telen had learned indicated either friendliness or predatory intent, depending on context. Yes, I imagine it is. We've decided that passive observation has continued long enough. The Soul Compact wishes to establish formal diplomatic relations with the Galactic Confederacy. That is not possible, stated Cthar Prime flatly. You are not a recognized, spacefaring civilization under Confederate protocols. The human's expression didn't change, but something in her posture shifted subtly. With respect, Convict Cthar Prime, we are not requesting recognition. We are informing you of a new reality. The Soul Compact now encompasses 27 inhabited star systems and 12 sentient species. We have established peaceful trade and cultural exchange throughout our region of space. The fact that she knew Cthar Prime's name and title sent another wave of shock through the Council. How have you accessed our secure communications? Demanded a Forlag representative. How do you know our language? Admiral Chen's smile broadened slightly. The probe you lost near our space 50 years ago was quite educational. We've had ample time to study your technology and linguistic databases. As for your secure communications, well, what you consider secure and what we consider secure appear to be different concepts. Telen moved closer to Elder Xylos, speaking quietly. This confirms everything our research suggested. They've leapfrogged expected development patterns, utilized technology we discarded as inefficient, and are now demonstrating capabilities we didn't anticipate for at least another century. Elder Xylos nodded almost imperceptibly before addressing the human again. Admiral Chun, your direct approach is unconventional. However, the Confederacy is always willing to discuss peaceful relations with new civilizations. Perhaps we could arrange a more formal diplomatic exchange. We would welcome that, responded the Admiral. In fact, we've prepared a delegation. With your permission, they are ready to transit to your coordinates immediately. Before the Council could respond, a notification appeared on Xylos's private display. A ship of unknown configuration had appeared at the edge of the Confederate capital system. Somehow, it had bypassed all early detection systems and simply arrived. It seems your delegation is already here, observed Elder Xylos, his tone carefully neutral despite the implicit threat of such capabilities. Admiral Chen nodded. Yes, we thought a demonstration of our transit technology might help establish the basis for productive discussions. The delegation is unarmed and comes in peace. They await your permission to approach. The Council chamber descended into chaotic debate once more. Some representatives demanded immediate defensive measures. Others argued for cautious engagement. Through it all, the human waited patiently, her image hovering above the central platform. Finally, Elder Xylos raised his crystalline appendages for silence. The Confederacy will receive your delegation, Admiral Chun. However, be aware that any hostile action will be met with the full defensive capabilities of all Confederate species. The human's expression became solemn. Understood, Elder Xylos. Our delegation comes seeking friendship, not conflict. However, I should note that the Soul Compact maintains similar defensive postures. We believe cooperation will benefit all our species far more than confrontation. As arrangements were made for the human delegation's arrival, Telen approached Elder Xylos in a private communication chamber. This changes everything, Telen stated simply. Yes, agreed the ancient crystalline being, but perhaps not in the way many fear. Notice what they did not do, Archivist. They did not attack. They did not make threats. They demonstrated capability, certainly, but then immediately offered dialogue. A tactical approach, suggested Telen. Show strength, then negotiate from position of advantage. Perhaps, Elder Xylos's crystalline structure pulsed with thoughtful patterns. Or perhaps something more. Did you notice the Admiral's final statement? About cooperation benefiting all species. A diplomatic platitude, dismissed Telen. Maybe, or maybe they truly believe it. Elder Xylos turned to face the stars visible through the chamber's transparent walls. We've been asking the wrong question all along, Archivist. We've been asking whether humans are dangerous. Of course they are dangerously unpredictable, dangerously creative, dangerously adaptable. The right question, continued the Elder, is whether that danger will manifest as destruction or transformation. And that, I suspect, depends as much on how we respond to them as on their inherent nature. Telen considered this. You believe we should embrace the risk they represent? I believe we have no choice, replied Elder Xylos. They exist. They are here. They will change the galaxy simply by being part of it. The question now is whether we fight that change or help shape it. As the human delegation's ship drew closer to the Confederate capital, visible now as a bright point of light growing steadily brighter, Telen felt a strange mixture of dread and excitement. The Confederacy was about to come face to face with the galaxy's most dangerous species, not because of their weapons or their numbers, but because of their capacity to redefine what was possible. Whether that redefinition would lead to a new golden age for all species or to chaos and destruction remained to be seen. But one thing was certain: the galaxy would never be the same again.